Hey, welcome to the third pre-conference training for the Transcend ClinicalEx Bootcamp that's coming up very shortly. This is a very important training. I want to explain to you, define for you what clinical excellence really is. I mean, it's a much higher level of the typical standard practice. Now, the standard practice, we went to school for the same amount of time. We all learn procedures. We feel like we have patients, majority of them that like us. Some that love us. We feel like we give good quality care. We get some good results with our treatments. But clinical excellence is very different. It's like, being a Starbucks versus, a small mom and pop shop that has one coffee shop with just a few customers. To be a Starbucks, there must be standardized keys and factors that must be met on a daily, a moment-to-moment basis. Now, I'm going to share with you the components of clinical excellence, and I want you to check off. There's a checklist download that you can kind of follow along and check off those components that you have. But if you really truly want clinical excellence, which is to become the pinnacle of success in your industry, in your community, then you'll want to follow along. Let's go ahead and get started. The standardized components, there's 11 key components that in my standardized approach and measurement of clinical excellence in a particular practice. So let's go and jump in. The first one is going to be efficiency. Second one is accuracy. Third are competency, accountability, authority, compassion, privacy, security, results, effectiveness, and lastly, trust. Now, I know that seems like a long list, but don't worry, this isn't going to be a very tedious process for you to achieve clinical excellence, but it's going to take you some time. It's going to take some implementation of some key systems and some key tasks. And it's not difficult. It's not like rocket science or anything like that. But I do want you to know the components, and I do want you to start implementing and plugging some of the holes if you really want to achieve that level of clinical excellence, the pinnacle in your industry. So let's start with efficiency. I'm going to go through these very quickly. I'm not going to go in depth into them. We'll definitely do that in the Transcend ClinicalEx Bootcamp, but I do want to just cover some of these for you so you kind of understand it, so you can kind of measure and grade your clinic right now. When I talk about efficiency, I want you to focus on licensed staff because they're the ones who get paid the most. They're the ones, if you start to create efficiency there, increase productivity there, you're going to get a higher return financially. So I want you to focus on them versus like your aides, your receptionist, your biller, etc. So start by removing the common blockers. The number one common blocker is documentation. There's typically too much documentation that's being done by most staff therapists. There's redundancies. There's things that they're saying over and over again every single session, every day, and things that are insignificant, things that don't necessarily add to the quality of the documentation. So I'm going to show you how to cut out those blockers with the documentation. But there's also non-standardized sequencing of treatment plans. This is another big mistake that decreases efficiency. And then what I mean by non-standardized sequencing of treatment plans is, having every single patient kind of their treatments being sequenced differently, different things being done at different times, at different sequences, so everyone kind of having kind of a free-for-all, no real standardized system. Excessive subjective and verbal communication, too much talking. It's great to talk with the patient. I'm not saying for you not to, but I'm talking about verbalizing, doing the subjectives, doing them a little bit too long, talking a little bit too much. Let your ancillary staff do most of the personal talking. You should be focused on achieving the goal at hand. Also, engaging in activities outside the plan of care, meaning I see a lot of staff therapists who are talking to patients, also looking at other body parts, reviewing things with patients that isn't really within the plan of care of why the patient's there. So essentially, you're not getting paid for that, and it's wasted time. Now, if it's significant, if the patient complains about something, a different body part, different diagnosis, it's significant, then you can actually create another case. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about on a daily basis, moment-to-moment basis, staff wasting time on other things outside of the plan of care. And then also EMR. I know that many of you are not going to receive this very warmly, but EMR is very helpful administratively. It helps you to bill better, schedule, recall, certain documentation quicker, a little bit quicker. It helps your administrative staff, but it really hurts the clinical staff because you definitely can't be looking at a monitor. You don't want your clinicians sitting at a computer very long. There's a lot of wasted time that's put on clinicians because of EMRs. And a lot of EMRs, believe it or not, their documentation systems are really set up to be too much, and also can potentially get you into trouble. I've been in court cases, 3 different court cases, where the EMR was one of the factors in why they didn't have the correct documentation. So I know you don't like to hear that because you like to have an EMR, a scheduling billing system, all under one roof, but right now there isn't one. I've demoed so many, but there isn't one that's actually adequate. So I'm going to show you a way where you can have your clinical staff, your high value, your licensed staff, really save time. But we'll see if you receive it warmly or not. Second is accuracy. Basically, what I mean by that is the documentation being done accurately. Are you doing self audits and chart reviews? If you're not, then there's a very high chance that documentation is not being done accurately. Third is competency. Are patients being taken through the treatment cycle? The exam, the treatment plan, the progression, the re-evals, the discharge. Are they being taken through that appropriately? Are treatment procedures, are they appropriate for the patient case, for the diagnosis and the patient profile? Documentation. Are the therapists, clinicians completing documentation thoroughly, efficiently, accurately? And are you doing competency reviews? Because if you're not, there's a good chance that the clinicians are not actually being competent on a day-to-day, on a regular, moment-to-moment basis. This is very true. Are you doing chart audits? Are you making sure that, because charting and documentation is a reflection of what's going on inside the clinician's head. So chart audits tell me a lot. Is very important in my systems. 4 is accountability. Are patients instructed on the rehab process? Is their involvement being tracked? Are they being instructed on what their role is in that rehab process? Are they being held accountable? Is homework given to them? Are they being given self-care education and then, tested or quizzed when they come back? The next is going to be authority, number 5. Our staff, are they establishing authority with the patient? Is it clear to the patient that their job is to follow the instructions and advice of the staff? It's very important that the patient is made clear that their job is to do what they're told. Don't leave it up to common knowledge, common sense. Don't expect that the patient knows that that's their job. You got to make sure it's clear. 6 is compassion. Our therapists and staff trained on how a patient feels and what they go through emotionally, psychologically, personally, and financially as a patient. Are you training them regularly on how to be compassionate? Because compassion doesn't just happen. You've got to train your staff on it. And are you logging it and are you quizzing them on their level of understanding of the patient's needs? 7 is privacy. is the level of preferred privacy determined with each and every patient. Every patient has their own level of preference of how much privacy they want. Don't just leave it to assumption. Don't just think, oh, this is a young person that's fit, athletic, so they don't mind if we expose their body. No. You can't leave it up and open. You've got to make sure that you determine it with each and every patient. What is your protocol to determine the level of preferred privacy for a patient? Because this can actually make you lose a patient if you don't do this correctly. And also, is it properly being implemented each and every session with that particular patient? How do you track it? How do you track to make sure that privacy is being respected for each and every individual? Number 8, security. Is PHI, protected health information, being kept secure? Is staff properly following security protocols? And lastly, which I don't see a lot of clinics doing, even though there are being charges and fines starting to happen more frequently today for therapy practices, is are they training their staff regularly on PHI and how to keep things secure, especially with emails and computers being used more and more today. It's much more significant. Now, number 9, results. Are you training your staff on fast-acting techniques? Do you have fast-acting techniques for every body part, every joint? Are treatment results being measured? How do you quantify the results, track it, and how do you standardize it? Because if you're not, then there's a good chance that results are not happening to the adequate level that's required to be competitive today, to be a high-level clinic where you have a lot of family and friends being brought in, you got a lot of elective services being purchased. How is administration ensuring high-level results? How are you doing it? 10, effectiveness. Results alone is not the measure, not at all the measure of quality. Some patients don't improve clinically at all sometimes, but still feel they were helped tremendously. Now, when all the components of clinical excellence is followed, then you will have effectiveness. And how are you measuring the effectiveness of your clinical systems? Are you using surveys? Are you quantifying it? Are you making sure that you're looking at that data? 11 is trust. Is trust being fostered in the relationship with the patient? Is the therapist applying the trust factors? Because it's not common sense knowledge. I mean, there's you don't just automatically gain trust. Trust has to be earned. So, are the trust factors being applied by your clinicians for the given patient profile? Because each person requires a little bit different in order to earn their trust. Are they trained on the 4 patient personality types? Are key words, phrases, touch, the appropriate amount of touch, eye contact, and proper expressions utilized by your clinicians and your staff? Because without trust, you can lose patients. You'll definitely not get family and friends, but you can lose that patient, lose their compliance, lose their, they'll do a lot. There will be a lot more no-shows, last-minute cancels, and much less results and outcomes. So, trust. Get ready for the Transcend Clinical Excellence course. Black and white difference. You're going to definitely come walking out of this equipped with the tools, the knowledge, the steps on becoming the pinnacle clinic in your community for your industry. So get excited. See you soon. Bye.